welcome to my very first episode of Skoen's Tavern, the talk show. With my first guest, and I'm very honored to have him as a guest, John Mark Hicks, a writer of tabletop RPGs and also DM sometimes in Infinite Monkey Tales, where I also play and run games. And I don't know if you already also play there, but I would say yes.
I think I played there once. I usually GM.
Because I did play once. So let's start with the questions. We'll start. I got this as an advice of someone that it's a question I bet you would talk a long time about it. How did you get into role-playing games?
Oh my lord, that's an easy one actually. I started fighting fantasy game books in 1983.
Wasn't even alive back then.
Don't say that. And so we started then fighting fantasy game books from, of course, Ian Livingstone and Steve Jackson. And then later on that year, I bought 2 or 3 of the books through the Puffin Book Club, if anybody in the UK is old enough to remember that. And a friend of mine then said, there's this thing called Dungeons and Dragons, if you fancy having a crack at that. So I went to a Dungeons and Dragons club in 1984 at my school with the red box D&D, with the Larry Airmore cover. And I played a thief because I needed a thief for the group. And that's my first game and just carried on from there. So 1984, nearly 40 years now I've been playing games.
Wow.
I've had a couple of hiatuses and a couple of breaks for real life stuff. But yeah, I've been pretty consistent, I hope.
So you actually started in the first edition then? Did you, or was it second?
Yeah, well, basic D&D I started with. I think it was the 3rd iteration of basic D&D. I didn't start playing AD&D for another couple of years. And between then I was playing like Traveller. We were doing like a Star Wars campaign using Traveller. That was about 85, 86. And before the actual Star Wars role-playing game came out. And then in the late 80s, then I got into AD&D 2nd edition. I've still got all my 1st edition books and one of my 2nd edition books. But the rest of it I parted with a long time ago.
Yeah,
But I played that for a couple of years and then didn't really get on with it because I was playing Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay, Star Wars, Call of Cthulhu, MERP, and I didn't come back to Dungeons and Dragons until sort of 2009. Well, for the better part of 20 years. I was playing everything and anything I could from the 80s all the way up to the late 2000s.
So but you started with it before you actually got interested in writing it yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. I spent a lot of time writing games for personal use, so adventures for the different campaigns I was running. I was running 3 campaigns a week, so I was doing a lot of writing and creating for that sort of stuff. And I didn't start thinking about wanting to write for role-playing games until the late 90s, around about 97. I was writing a couple of articles just messing around, and I sent one off in the UK, we had a magazine called Arcane magazine. And it'd been running for about 17, 18 issues. It was doing okay, and it covered all role-playing games. And I wrote an article about where you get ideas from being a games master. And the editor said, yeah, I'll publish that. And I'll pay you some money for it. And I was like, that's fantastic, thank you very much. Yeah, and then magazine folded before it got published. So
yeah, but that's what you want as a writer. You want to be published.
Absolutely, yeah. I didn't really push to get my stuff published for a while. In fact, that was probably one of the very few times I actually sent stuff off. I remember sending stuff off to KSEM. I had an idea for a War of the Worlds / Cthulhu sort of Lovecraftian adventure. Which nothing came of again because nobody knew who I was. So but you've got to try at the end of the day. If you don't try, you don't get anywhere.
That's true.
And then I kind of gave up a little bit and didn't really bother. And then I got a couple of stories published by the British Science Fiction Association, which I was really pleased with. And then again, I didn't do anything with it. and then real life took over, and got married, had a son, had to work a day job, which was a bit of a nightmare. And then a few years ago, my gaming wasn't really happening a lot, so I started interviewing other game designers and companies and company owners and sort of pushing their products and doing stuff for RPG.net for my own website. I was being sent loads of review material, which was fantastic. So I was doing lots of interviews and reviews. And then I thought one day I'll just write an adventure for Advanced Fighting Fantasy. It's the game that I started with. I thought I'd have a crack. I had this idea for a game, Floating Dungeon of Varka's Lair, and sent it off to Arian Games, and they went, "Yeah, we'll publish that for you." I said, "Thank you very much." I wrote another one, and then I just went on from there. So I didn't mean to fall into games design. I more preferred playing than I did designing games. But yeah, I started doing it. I found that I really enjoyed it, so I thought I might just go the whole hog and design an entire game, and that's
Yeah.
when I went to those dark places.
Yeah, and now you are the one being interviewed yourself instead of interviewing someone else.
Yeah, it's a bit strange being on this side of the fence. It is a bit strange, but
Yeah,
um, but yeah,
I
at
mean,
least I kind of know what to expect.
yeah, because you did it yourself, you always know what to expect. And since I technically never did it, for me it's all still a dip in the new world.
Yeah, well, it's the great thing about this hobby is that everything you get, you progress with experience.
Exactly,
So
exactly.
so it works in every way.
Yeah, that it is. So, but you did play a lot of different kinds of RPGs then.
Yeah, lots. I used to, at one point, I had a massive selling about 16 years ago, and I sold off a lot of my collection, about 90% of my collection. And I think that when I had it all listed down, I think I had about 65 different role-playing games.
Wow.
So I was just fascinated with the way role-playing were written. Role-playing games were written. It wasn't just about the rules. A lot of the time, the rules didn't interest me. It was the setting. And so I used to cannibalise different settings to create my own stuff. So, but yeah, I had a lot. I don't anymore. I've probably got about 13 different systems now.
Well,
Most of them sort of independent publishers, but
I do
yeah,
see
yeah.
quite the bookcase behind you. So,
Well, believe it or not, that's just part of it. There's still 2 boxes worth in my garage downstairs, and I haven't got space for it. And the shelves are so broken. If I put stuff on top of it, down. I'm not. No, I don't have the insurance for that. But yeah, I've got a lot of games. Like I say, I buy a lot from independent publishers because if they haven't got the budget, they go for the creativity. It's the creativity that I'm enjoying. So.
yeah. So, and what kind of style of tabletop RPGs do you like? Because, in my opinion, I still love D&D, of course, but I feel like that's more combat oriented than actual roleplay oriented. What do you
Yeah.
like most?
Well, Dungeons and Dragons, of course, its history is wargaming, so it's come from chainmail, etc., etc. It's just a fancy war game, but it has evolved over the years. So now there's a lot more of a role playing element to it, and that's kind of improved. At the end of the day, it is a very crunchy, sort of stylized war game, and it relies a lot on encounters and that sort of stuff. And that's how I used to play the game back in the 80s. It used to be miniature figures, and here's one of my miniature figures actually. It's probably from the old Games Workshop range. That's one of my old Mert figures for the 1980s.
Oh, nice.
That's Tit Sword Song. So it used to be miniature figures on a map. Usually, what we used to do is get like wallpaper, and you turn it over and it's white on the back, and we draw the maps on the back of the wallpaper. So, and then when we're done with it, we'd rip it off, fold it up, and keep it if you wanted to, or just dump it and start the next bit. So, there's a hint for you: buy a roll of wallpaper, you've got endless map.
Well, they kind of still do that, but they now just put over a like a foil over the wallpaper that you can take away the marker and everything that you can reuse it.
You can get wrapping paper. Some wrapping paper has squares on the back of the wrapping paper, so you can cut straight lines. And a lot of the time, the squares on the wrapping paper match the bases of a lot of quite miniatures.
Kind of like the 5-foot squares, you could say.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and it matches, and I only found that out about a year ago. I thought that's absolutely brilliant. So, anyway, sorry, I digressed. I do apologise. We used to do a lot of basically it was just simulation. So going to a dungeon, walk around the corridors, kill some stuff, and then nick their belongings. So this is basically Dungeons and Dragons, and that's a great introductory game. It's a great way to get started because you're putting players and characters in a kind of restricted location, so you've got better control, especially as the DM, as to where they can and can't go. And it's kind of stayed like that. And then in the late 80s, I got into MERP, Middle Earth Roleplay, and that's a lot crunchier than Dungeons and Dragons that I was playing. But a friend of mine, Paul, one of my first games masters, started to inject a lot more story into the games. So there was a lot more character to the NPCs. There were things going on, and you're a bit more involved and intrigued. And it started to get a little bit emotional in some areas as well. So your acting skills come out. and you get quite deeply involved with the characters. And that's when I realised that storytelling is just as powerful as rolling the dice on the tabletop. And then I started gaming more towards telling a collaborative narrative and just rolling dice. Rolling dice, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's great fun, and some of my best games have been that I've played in just rolling dice. But sometimes when you get, when I think about my old games, I don't think about the numbers that I rolled on the table. I think about how I felt during that game. So, and those are the memories that stick with me. Those are the kind of games that I enjoy playing.
Yeah, the chat is saying that your voice is sometimes fading a little bit. I hear it too, but I'm already happy that that we hear you, because before we started, I didn't even hear him, and he was trying everything. So I'm already happy that I can hear him.
Yeah, my headphones broke with the speakers on, so I'm having to make do with very basic equipment. It's probably just because every time I'm moving, the microphone is probably shifting about. So yeah sorry.
So
sorry.
this is the best we can do. At least I'm happy that we can hear him, and that at least the episode is finally happening. Because I had this idea for quite a long time to do this. And now I normally I wouldn't talk about systems and everything, but since you wrote your own system and setting, we are going to talk about that, of course.
Okay.
You've written Those Dark Places. You've even run it once with me as a player in it on Infinite Monkey Tales, and that's more like a sci-fi dark horror kind of setting, like comparable to Alien.
That's one of my influences. The films of the late 70s, early 80s, like Alien, Outland, Blade Runner. Basically, those kind of really dark dystopian sci-fi films. I think somebody referred to Alien once as like blue-collar workers. You're not interested in all the big shiny stuff. This is the people working on the ground, doing all the nasty work. And I love it. I mean, that's absolutely brilliant. So that's what I based the game on. I started writing Those Dark Places with a completely different system about 12 years ago. And it just didn't really click with me. It's got a bit like a big sci-fi horror role-playing. And I put the rules out for people to have a look at and to have a play with and get some feedback. I was getting some feedback, and some good feedback, but the bad outweighed the good. And the bad was it didn't have the atmosphere, didn't have the feeling. Then the more I worked on it, the more I realised that I was moving away from crunchy rules and heading more into a rules-light game. And that's what I did. I wanted to concentrate on the atmosphere and on the setting. All the idea that I was going for, the aesthetic that I was going for, and then rules took a back seat. And then the result was Those Dark Places. A very, very simple rules-light system with an identifiable and enjoyable background. Of course, when I was writing it, I was going to do a kind of an Alien kind of angle to it. So there'd be weird things happening out in space, that kind of Lovecraftian horror, where it's that kind of cosmic unknown terrors. And then Free Illigan announced Alien role-playing game, and I was like, oh, bugger. So I took a step back and sort of scaled it back a little bit. I went, you know what? I'm not going to allude to that anymore. I'm still going to say that Alien's the greatest film in the world because, let's face it, it is. It's
not often that a sequel is better than the first movie.
You see, I love Aliens. I saw Aliens when I was 15, and it's one of my seminal movies. I grew up with that film, and I've riffed on it so many times. I love it. But as much as I love it as an action movie, I think it's a terrible sequel because it's gone in a completely different direction, and it's done stuff. And it's basically I prefer the first one because of what it is, because of how it's made, how it looks, how it feels. And Aliens departs from that, and sadly, it's that Aliens.
With part 3, they tried to go back to it.
Yeah, but Alien is my preferred. That's why Alien Isolation is my preferred sequel, because it's taken that same sort of atmosphere, intenseness, and design, and instead of adding to it, like making the aliens ants and a big queen ant, and big guns, they just expanded its hunting ground and put it in a situation. The situation wasn't about the alien getting bigger, badder, and more of them. It was about what would happen to normal people if they were put in a situation where this creature was around. What would you do to survive in a large station full of people? Well, that was a much more interesting angle. But Aliens, oh god, Aliens is just a work of genius. Let's be honest. It's fun, it's fast, it's frenetic, it's thrilling, and it's my favourite action movie of the 1980s by far. Sorry, went off on a tangent then, so sorry.
It's okay. Because that was the fun thing when I played in the game with you as a GM. You said there are no aliens in this setting. And
That's
I was
right.
like, I don't care. I want to be a xenobiologist. I'm
No,
going
that's
to
fine.
be the guy that wants to meet an
And
alien.
and it worked really well because you were so convinced that what you were looking for was an alien.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, oh, you're like that guy on Ancient Aliens. You're that going, alien, you know, and I'm going to find it. I'm going to get there.
Yeah.
And because your character was so focused on that, they didn't lose focus of what was happening. But, you know, that was their character arc. When it got to the end and it turns out it wasn't aliens. I mean, what I've said in the game is I've not written aliens into it. I've not put aliens into it. I think the idea or the fear of the unknown is more powerful than actually meeting it to its face. But if you want to chuck aliens in it, you knock yourself out. And that's one of the reasons why I left a bestiary and that sort of thing out of it, is because I realised that if I did that, people would have... It's like having a Dungeons and Dragons monster manual. If the players read that or see that, they'll know that they're out there and they'll be wondering what's going to come next. And you've got these players who read up on every monster so they know how to defeat it, the sort of metagaming sort of thing. So I left it out. Completely left it out. So then the game, the hand, all the power goes back into the hand of the games master. So if they want to include a nasty alien, fine. If it's a genetic beastie, fine. If it's just somebody's angry cat, even better. You know what I mean? Because they don't know what to expect. So
Don't make it an angry cat. They are indestructible. You can't beat them.
absolutely. Oh yeah, I know. My cat's. I've got a cat called Jones, and yes, she is indestructible.
Yeah, my cats, they do what they want. I mean, like you saw just now, one of them was also a guest.
It's a good-looking cat. That Freya or Loki?
That one was Loki, yeah. The other one that
beautiful.
was back here on my seat, that was Freya.
Fantastic names.
Thank you. Like we said, you've run and played quite some games then in your 40 years of playing and GMing games.
Yep.
What are the most fun or horrific, surprising experiences you've had that really stick with you?
I wrote a sequence of articles on RPG.net called Observations from a Gamer's Chair. And if you want to read some horror stories, go and read. There's about 50-odd articles on there, which were released over a period of about 2.5 years. If you want to read some horror stories about some of the stuff that I've experienced, then yeah, there's some stuff that I've experienced as a gamer which I don't want to talk about. I don't want to embarrass people. There's people who might be watching this who just kind of know, but there was some amazing stuff. One involving a rat, which I won't go into, and of somebody actually physically getting bit at a table during a game of Vampire the Masquerade. So it's just, I've got, like I say, I've got plenty of
That
stuff.
person was getting a little bit too deep into the character.
Very into it, yeah. So, and it's understandable. It was an intense game. Vampire the Masquerade is designed for those kind of intense, emotionally driven games. But you know, dial it back a bit. It's not LARP. So yeah, it was, but still, sometimes you can say, yeah, it was horrible. But sometimes you look back on those instances with a sense of fondness, because those were the big events of your old game. Yeah, it's a bit embarrassing for some people. Sometimes it was embarrassing for me. I'm not innocent. But sometimes you look back on it and think, yeah, actually, there was a lot of fun to be had there. But I think, as far as gaming is concerned, it honestly depends on the system. And the system and the campaign which I had the most fun with, which lasted for the better part of 9 years, was Star Wars D6, the original Star Wars game. We started with the original game in 1987 and just played it within, for the next decade. It was a constant campaign, one game a week. Lots and lots of players coming and going, wanting to be involved. And yeah, absolutely incredible game. So my fondest memories are probably, as far as group games are concerned, are my Star Wars games, because I'm sure everybody's experienced it, and if you haven't, then just keep gaming, because it will happen one day. It's going to be a time when you're at a table and everybody clicks. Each player clicks, you're all on the same page. And I was lucky because my friends were all Star Wars fans and gamers, so it was just lightning in a bottle, and we had a fantastic time all that time. And interestingly, my friend Mark Newbold, who runs a website called Fantha Tracks, which is one of the biggest Star Wars fan sites in the world, and he was one of my gamers. I've known him since I was 13 years old. We got into the hobby together, and so he got into Star Wars fandom and started doing different websites, lightsaber.co.uk, then Jedi News, then Fantha Tracks. And now he travels the world, going to conventions, giving interviews on stages for the stars, the jammy sod. And he's published by like the Star Wars Insider and all the big magazines. And what he's done is he wrote the Build Your Own Millennium Falcon. And he actually wrote in details of our campaign into Build Your Own Millennium Falcon. So technically, our role-playing campaign sector is now Star Wars canon.
That is actually pretty awesome.
Cheeky sod. You also got the guy as well. I can't remember his name, and I do apologise. The guy who drew the maps for the Star Wars Atlas. He actually got him to draw in that style our entire sector that we used to. We created an entire sector to game in. Dozens of planets, characters, worlds, moons, ships, companies, gang lords. Because we used to do the underworld stuff. So it felt very real to us, and that's probably why I have great memories of it. Yeah, but to know that in an official magazine somewhere, it's referring to the Cetapod cluster, which is where our games were set, and Desando Dynamics, which was a company that built Starship engines, which we created, is absolutely fantastic.
But that's what I like about role playing, and especially the homebrew things. Even though it is, you do have some people that are like big Star Wars nerds. I love Star Wars myself, but some of them, when you do those homebrew things, they are like, that's
just as
not
real.
That's not Star Wars. That's not lore. So what?
Yeah.
You're playing a role-playing game.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. We had one rule in our campaign, was that our characters couldn't be more powerful than existing characters, like in the main story, the Star Wars movies and stuff. And we didn't intrude on the bigger Star Wars story. I mean, we had things like Stormtroopers and Star Destroyers, and like Vader made a guest appearance once. But we wanted to make it as real to us. And if somebody was looking in from the outside, it would also work for them, because we weren't doing stupid things like, I shot Luke Skywalker in episode 2. What? You know what I mean? So we tried to make it as grounded as possible, and that's what gave it its sense of realism to us. And you can say that about quite a lot of role-playing campaigns. Campaign settings are designed to be adapted, and how there's no set way to play a game, there's no set way to interpret a game. So what happens at your table is just as real as to what's happening at somebody else's table.
Exactly.
Just as important.
Yeah, and I would say I've only played Edge of the Empire of the Star Wars role-playing games. I loved it, but we also made it so, if I'm not mistaken, that it played out like thousands of years before or after the movies, so that we just couldn't in what way influence anything that happened during that time. Yeah. So
no, and that's great, because then it gives you makes, like I say, makes it feel a lot more involved and a lot more real, as if you're gaming in the Star Wars universe. But 2, you've detached it so much, you can pretty much go off on any tangent that you want to, and that's great gaming. And it's great freedom as well. You don't feel restricted by what's come before. You can pretty much go off and do what you want. Yeah. Within the confines of the rules of that particular setting. So.
Yeah, that's definitely what I like with role-playing games. Just the settings. Just create your own world and create your characters and do with them what you like. Things you can't do in real life.
Unless there's something really wrong or something weird going on, what you do at your table is just, like I say, just as real as what happens at everybody else's tables. Because if you do something different, you're not going to have like the Forgotten Realms police knocking your door down saying, right, we're taking your books off you, because Rich de Wood wouldn't talk that way. You know what I mean? That's not going to happen. So it's not canon. Get out. So you can pretty much do what you want. I've always said, and I said it in my book as well. Rules are there to be bent and broken. So whatever, if you change it and it works for your table, then that's all. That's it. That's all that matters.
That's why I'm also a big fan of the rule of cool, as we call it.
Oh yeah, rule of cool. There's a great line. There's a film called oh my god, it's called The Gamers, Darkness Rising.
I've seen that one. Yeah.
Dead Gentleman Productions, and it's brilliant. I love it. It's my favourite Dungeons and Dragons film. And there's a line in it where Lodge says, "A story trumps rules." That's true to a certain extent, and the rule of cool is absolutely brilliant, and that's why I like rules like games, because everything's quite abstract and can be interpreted. Yeah. But there does need to be like if you start if you don't, if you start to ignore the dice rolls, then you might as well just be sat around chatting about a story and not making the rolls. There's still an element of chance and the game there. But yeah,
That's why you have the dice rolls.
absolutely, and that's what you want as a gamer. You want to know that you've done well based on your decisions, and not only the decisions that you make as a character, but the decisions that you make as far as your actions are concerned.
Yeah, but that's why
And again, that goes back to the gaming's wargaming roots.
that's why I think dice rolls should be part of any role-playing game, because even though you did it for years as your work or whatever, as your profession, under stressful moments you can make mistakes, and those are the dice rolls.
That's it, and that's what it is. If you can't make a decision as to what as if something's worked or not, that's where the dice rolls come in, and that's what makes role-playing games exciting. Because not only does it make it exciting because you don't know what's going to happen next, it forces you as a GM and as a player to adapt to the situations when they do go wrong. Sometimes some of the most interesting stories can be told because of one dice roll going wrong.
Yeah.
I've had weeks of extra campaign material because players have rolled badly. They've almost all died, had to escape, and then reapproach the problem. So you know what I mean. So I can't do. I've played diceless role playings before, and they can be fun.
Oh yeah.
And I'm not quite on board with it because there's part of my brain which just doesn't click. I can't grok that kind of role playing. I'll always go back to dice, and yeah, it's that sense of chance that makes the games exciting, both as a player, because like you say, it don't want to happen yet, and as a GM as well, because I don't know what's going to happen next, and I'm a player at that table as well, and I want to be part of the unfolding story, even though I'm telling you like 80% of it. So, and that's what makes it fun. Keeps you on the seat of your pants.
Yeah, well, in that way, I am now running masks on INT, on the Infinite Monk
Yes, I've
Tales.
watched it. Yeah, it's very.
It's powered by the Apocalypse, and that system, the dungeon or the game master doesn't roll a dice whatsoever. It's all in the dice of the players. But even though I do not roll any dice, I still love that system.
Yeah.
Mostly because it's more narrative driven.
I designed a game where it's not GMless, but the GMless doesn't have to roll any dice, and I can't even remember what it's called. I think it's called Sword, Sandals, and Death Scenes. I can't remember. So it was what I gave it away free on Twitter. I can't remember. So yeah, I think that's great because as the DM then, as the GM then, you don't have to worry about the rules. You can focus on telling the story, and that's what I like about rules-like games. That's why I designed Those Dark Places the way that I did. You don't have. There's no charts. There's no tables. I mean, there's probably a little bit of page flicking just for just so you can say, oh, actually, how does that work? But once it's in your head, that's it. You don't have to do it. So all you have to concentrate on is rolling dice and talking. That's it. Because I think, and that was one of the downfalls with quite a few games, especially back in the late 80s, early 90s. They were trying so hard to be simulationist. They lost focus on the role-playing aspect of it, and that's why I got bored of them very quickly. It took me 6.5 hours once to create a War Master character. So it took me longer to create him than I did actually play him. So so my rule of thumb now, if I can't create a character in 15 minutes, then I don't think I'm going to be playing. Because if it's going to take me that long to create a character, how long is it going to take me to decide what he can and can't do during a game? So
yeah, I think also that's one of the reasons why a lot of Dungeons and Dragons fans don't like the 4th edition. They try to make it look too much like an MMORPG instead of an actual role-playing game.
Yeah, and that's what they were up against at the time. I mean, Warcraft was at its height, and that's what they're up against. The thing is, I got back into D&D thanks to 4th edition. In fact, my friend Jason sadly broke his leg, so we had plenty of time to sit around buying the books and designing.
I know how that feels.
Yeah, I do. Yeah, mate. Sorry about that. That's my fault. Just to reiterate. But yeah, and we sat down and we played a campaign for about 4 months, and I actually really enjoyed because I've been playing Warcraft. So I actually really enjoyed 4th edition. I loved its design. I loved the way it was laid out. People say there's not much room for role playing in it, but you can say that about any game really. If you're focusing on the mechanics, D&D 5th edition, you can easily say there's not enough room for role playing. But it's what you make of it that counts as the group. But yeah, I had a great time with it. Yeah, it was very crunchy. It was extremely stats driven, and yeah, that scares me away a little bit. But it was great fun.
Okay. Well, let's see. Yeah, and of course, players, we all know that if you run a game, players always make a choice that you don't want them to make. You have a idea that they need to go that way, and they always go that way. Did you have any choices? Did players anytime surprise you with the choices they made? Maybe
Those
even
times.
in the game that I was in.
Yeah, in fact, nearly every single game I've run for IMT. I've run a couple of games for Garplay Games as well, and both in nearly every single game, the players have either said or done something that I wasn't expecting. So, when I design a game, when I design an adventure, I don't design a story. Although I did do something like that for Legacy of Blood for against the Dark Master. It was telling a story, but what you do with that story is completely up to you. So I try not to design a story, I try to design a situation. So I'll build the situation, drop you in it, and then I'll adapt then, depending on your decisions. But sometimes, many times I've had curveballs thrown at me because somebody will suddenly say, do you know what, I'm going to do this, this and this. And I'll be sitting there thinking, well, that's fantastic. Should we take a 5-minute break? Because I have absolutely no idea what to do about that. So, but it's inevitable. The players will always come up with something that you're never expecting.
Yeah, because I saw Martin Starlord in my chat. I know he knows exactly what I'm talking about when I say this. Oil lamp. Let's see if he reacts. Because we were playing D&D and we went into a dungeon and one of our players heard there was an oil lamp and he asked, can I take the oil lamp? And the DM was, no, they are bolted to the wall. And he was like doing half an hour or something just to try to get that oil lamp. And we were like, no, continue on. Stuff like that. Sometimes some players...
As a GM, you've got to be careful how you describe things because you could describe something, it could be the most innocuous thing ever. Oh, there's a lump on the wall, and then that's the focus of the players for the next 15 minutes. I remember running a game ages ago in Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay, and they went to a tavern somewhere in Outdoor, I think it was. Actually, no, it was out in the boondocks, and they walked in, and I described the tavern, and there was a stranger in the corner looking mysterious, and that's the guy they were supposed to talk to, of course. But they were more interested in this goblin-looking dude sat at the bar, which I just described on a whim. Oh, he looks a bit like a goblin. And they went, oh, we'll go and talk to him. In the end, at the end of that game, I had to create a character, I can't remember what his name was, Gobble Snot or something, who they employed to come with them. And then, for the next 4 or 5 sessions, it was basically about them on an adventure with Gob. I was like, you're just a dude sat at the bar. Why are you interested in this nobody? But then Gob got really badly hurt out in the middle of nowhere. So I thought, if he's badly hurt, maybe they'll just dump him. But no, then that turned into a quest to get Gob back to civilization, to get him healed. That's about 4 or 5 games trying to battle them the way back. It's like, what? How did I get 6 weeks worth of gaming out of a description saying, oh, there's a few guys in the bar, this one looks a little bit like a goblin. Oh, we'll go and talk to him then. And it's me thinking, I'll tell you what, since then, I've been very careful about what I do and don't say about what's happening inside rooms. Because, again, there is no accounting for players at all.
Yeah, I had that with one of my first time playing 5th edition. I played my previous character died, and the only way the DM could get me in was they found a dead body of a female character, not knowing who. So I had to play female. I was like, okay, and I was a warlock. But the funny thing was, this warlock was chaotic neutral. You might, people that watched, you might hear this story come back often because it's still one of my favorite things that happened in a D&D game for me. We come across a bugbear and 2 orcs trying to eat a person and a human, and I was like, they almost wanted to eat us as well, and I was like, what are you doing? Oh, trying to eat this person. Why do you say that's food? Because he has a name. Food has name. Hey, Bob, this guy wants to know why we eat him. He called one of the orcs Bobs. And my character was like, that orc is named Bob, right? Yeah. So that name, that has a name, so it's food. And I had to roll. My rolls were lucky. It worked. So I made sure that this orc started, this bugbear started to eat the other orc, and the other orc started to eat the human, and we just walked ahead. Still one of my favorite encounters I ever had in D&D, and even the DM was like, damn.
this is what I say. This is what I'm saying. When you're playing a game, when you look back on your favourite moments in game, I can almost guarantee, even though there's some great combat scenes in a lot of the games that I've played in, I can almost guarantee you won't remember the dice rolls, unless it's one of those amazing, one in a million chance dice rolls, which I used to have quite a lot of in MERP, and my early D&D games as well. A lot of the times you're going to mention are those kind of moments where it was character driven, where something happened that made you feel good about your decisions, or something that you've done, or the way that you reacted to a certain situation. That's what you're going to remember, and that's what I strive for in games, in campaigns anyway. I find it very difficult to do one shots or short campaigns, but longer campaigns for definite. Yeah, but it's moments like that stick with you, and it will stick with you forever.
Yeah. But
It's really old and infirm, and then you can't remember what's reality, and then you'll be talking about orcs and bugbears eating each other, and then your great grandkids will be going, yeah, all right, Grandad, let's get you back into bed. You know?
Yeah, but just the thing that we didn't even use any combat or anything, we just talked our way out of it.
Yeah.
And yes, some players would be like, but we should save that human. I was as neutral, technically evil as hell. So I was like, why would I save that guy if this saves me? So yeah, I haven't seen any yet, but are some of the viewers? Don't forget, you may ask questions to him as well. I have a I have a channel request that you can ask questions to Mr. Hicks here, so.
Well, I can't see the Twitter feed because my bandwidth is terrible. So whatever questions come through, I'll have to leave you to edit.
Yeah, I'll tell you, but up till now I don't see any questions yet, but who knows, maybe they'll come. We've already talked a little bit about your inspiration for the game, as in the movies that are inspired. But are there also systems that inspired you to create your Those Dark Places game?
Initially, I was looking at doing a D6 version. One of my favourites, probably my favourite role-playing game system is the D6 system, as used in the original Star Wars game. And not just because it was used for Star Wars, but because it's actually a very, very versatile and modifiable system. There's a version of it at the moment by Anti-Paladin Games called the Mini-6 system, which I think is my favourite version of the D6 system. Very, very simple. The great thing about that, what Star Wars did with it, was that they made it accessible, they made it easy to understand, they made it fun. And I used to use that original first edition Wedge Star Wars rulebook, which I still have proudly on my shelf, for all kinds of different genres. It was like a core rulebook, just for role-playing in general. And it was simple as well, and with a lot of depth to it. So what I was basically looking for was a game system that was simple, and didn't intrude on the gameplay. I never felt that the Star Wars D6 system intruded much on the actual role-playing aspects of the game. But when I was originally designing Those Dark Places, I was taking inspiration from stuff like that, and then I thought, well, it's a science fiction game, so it's going to be a bit more technical. So I was looking to Traveller, because of course Traveller's just brilliant. It's a great game at the moment with that kind of alien ethic called Hostile by Zoza Games, which is very good. I can highly recommend that. So I was looking at Traveller, and then I was looking at like Traveller New Era. Then I was looking at Mega Traveller. Then I was looking at other games. There's a fantastic free of the game, which I think you know about, called Coriolis.
I heard about it, haven't played it. I know they are playing it offline on Sundays at Infinite Monk Tales.
It's beautiful, beautiful, beautiful.
That's why I believe they are now playing it at this moment. Yeah. That's why they aren't. Some of them aren't here, because they thought that game was more important than this episode.
I forgive for not being here. It's fine. I don't mind. And stuff like that. And then I was looking at the technical side of things, making things, how the starships work, blah blah. But then the more playtesting I did, the more I realised that I was spending so long worrying about how the system worked, or how spaceships worked, or how different kinds of guns worked. I had 8 different guns that designed all the different kind of weaponry. And then I realised all that is completely pointless, because when it comes down to it, when the players are there in the situation that I'm going to put them in, they're not thinking about the mechanics, they're not thinking about what kind of gun they're going to get out, which in itself is a little bit sort of slightly against the aesthetic that I was going for with the game. We're concerned about how they weren't going to die. The moment I found that we were getting into situations where, and I was trying 2 or 3 different systems for that kind of gaming, kind of horror, tension, sort of dark industrial sci-fi gaming. But every time the mechanics broke out, the tension just went out the room because everybody then stopped being in the moment and then switched to the numbers on the couch sheet.
Yeah.
And the dice were rolling. And then they were totting up and going against charts and tables, and then it's like, phew, this is a little bit boring. And then there was like turns and rounds, and it's like, oh god, and it just took the tension out of the moment. So in the end, I was looking at really simple games like Tiny D6. The late great Brian Fitzpatrick, rest his soul, designed a game called Aliens and Asteroids. Very, very, very simple D20 game, which focused on the rules. But once they clicked with you, they were dead simple. So when you actually get into these big firefights, you're rolling the dice and then just not thinking about it. And that's exactly the sort of thing that I wanted. So I stripped it back down as far as it would go, and the smallest dice I could get to for it to work in any way was the D6. I thought, how many D6 do you want to roll? And originally it was going to be roll a number of D6 and then score a 5 or a 6, and that's which I remember from Shadowrun back in the late 80s. That's where I got that inspiration from.
Oh yeah.
And then we were playing a game once, and I was just rolling a D6 on its own, adding modifiers, and it just clicked, kind of worked for me. I thought, well, that's what I'm going to do. Single D6, roll the dice, add your modifiers, and off.
Yeah.
And then from that basis, and then you're thinking about, well, how can I make the rest of the game simple? And then everything that's why I chose crew members instead of a skill list. You just said crew members, 7 different crew members, and there's 7 different crew members because there's 7 people on the Nostromo and Alien, so that's where that came from. And then I think about starships, and then somebody, I can't remember who said it. They said starships feel more like like a location than they do as a necessity. I thought you're absolutely right. Just do maps for the old starship. But other than that, they are just the way you get from point A to point B. You don't need rules. So I left all that out as well. And when I just cut it down, if you read the Those Dark Places rule book, it's probably about 12-15 pages of rules. And then the other 100 pages is building the atmosphere, the world, and the kind of games that will happen in using that rule system. And yeah, I was more than happy with that. To answer your question, is yes, there was probably about a dozen different game systems I looked at, which brought me to that point where I realised that I just wanted to strip it down to its basics.
Yeah, because you said a D6 system. Well, I'm a big fan of Masks that I'm running now, and it's powered by the Apocalypse. I just love the simplicity of that. You roll 2 D6s, you count nothing more than or a max a +3 or max a -2.
Yep.
And if it's 7 or higher, it's a success. 10+, it's a perfect success. And below that, it's just a failure.
Yeah, and that's brilliant. And that's all you need. And you don't need loads of different detailed rules depending on the situation that you find yourself in. You just want to be able to know that you can just roll those dice, add those modifiers that are applicable from your stat or your skills or what have you, and then it's over. Nice tail.
Yeah.
And then it's over.
Yeah, and especially with Masks, I liked when you fail, you get a potential. When you fail 5 times, you get an advancement, as in you go stronger. So you go stronger because of your failures.
Yeah, you learn from your mistakes.
Yeah.
That's absolutely fantastic. That's absolutely brilliant. I love that.
Yeah.
See, I remember experience points in Dungeons and Dragons used to be my go-to thing. And then I realised it didn't actually make that much sense, especially when you're getting experience points for getting gold. You might as well just go and rob a bank, and then next thing you know, you're level 20. So that was like, that didn't really sit well with me. And then it became very focused on getting experience points for killing things. And I'm thinking, So I used to like the Star Wars way of doing things. Did you succeed? Did you role play well? And did you do something extra special during the game? Here's your points. Brilliant. It's a little bit arbitrary, depending on the kind of game that you play. But I think that's when you aspire to game so well, to perform so well in the game, that you've affected the game in some way and the other players, and you get rewarded for it. It's much better than just rolling dice and rolling high and then killing monsters. Getting rewarded for good gaming is much, much better. Yeah.
Well, Strain did ask a question in the chat, and it's actually a pretty expected question of him for you. When are you going to GM a game for us again? And he is mostly talking about Star Wars D6.
I don't know is the answer. I'm literally just finishing a new project. Well, I say I'm finishing. I've finished it. I've finished my first. I've just sent it off to the publishers for approval. No doubt it's going to be a few weeks of editing and getting the artwork sorted out. That's due in November of next year, so it's a good year away before we see the results of that. and then I've literally gone straight into a new project. It's taken quite a lot of time, and then I'm also doing my side projects as well, like Fire Team and Cyber Streets and what have you. I'm not a full-time writer, in case anybody's thinking. I do have a day job, because there's no money in role-playing writing, unless you own a business, and even then, it's probably still handing it out. But yeah, one day I will do. I know that I will do. I'm just getting this. Like I say, this is my first Twitter sort of online thing for about 4 months now, and I'm just getting sort of back into the groove, so to speak, making time for it.
I believe the last time you were on Twitch was with that game that I was in of Those Dark Places.
Mm-hmm.
I believe that was the last time you were actually on Twitch again.
Yeah, if I remember rightly, I was taken quite badly ill during the actual game. So
because I believe we haven't even finished it yet.
No, I can't even remember what was going on. I'm gonna have to go back and watch it and get my notes. So I don't even remember what was happening. I know it was bad. But,
I know we did talk that when I would have been killed by that creature, my character would be like, "They do exist," and then it was death and.
Dead. And that was it. It was over. I was right. You know what I mean?
Yeah, something like that.
But one day, I will come back and finish it. I might actually run a game. That's not my game, actually. Talking about Star Wars D6 has got me excited again for that game.
I've never played it, and I would be very interested in playing it.
It's excellent. I mean, I enjoyed. I didn't like the D20 Star Wars. I kind of liked the Star Wars Saga edition. That was quite good. And I do like the new one. I always get a little bit finicky about funny dice. I prefer just traditional dice. But it's actually a really good game. I've got the first 3 box sets on my shelf back there. But Star Wars D6 is always going to be my favourite. It's always going to have a special place in my heart. That's one part I know the system inside out, and 10 parts nostalgia probably.
I'm always just a big fan of Star Wars, and a lot of people are like, I want to play a Jedi. No, give me stories that aren't Jedi's. And that's why I was a big fan of the movie Rogue One. There are no Jedi's, no actual Jedi's there in that one.
But they still allude to the religion. Rogue One is actually my favourite Star Wars film. There, I said it. Rogue One is my favourite Star Wars film. I mean, I was a massive fan of Empire Strikes Back. I mean, everybody is, of course. That was my favourite. But then when I saw Rogue One, that's what I was looking for, especially in a new Star Wars movie.
Yeah, and that's why I'm now so hyped for Andor.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to Andor. I've probably enjoyed the majority of the Star Wars stuff that's come out on Disney Plus at the moment. The Mandalorian, I love it. I think it's absolutely brilliant.
Yeah, that they are going now more towards non-Jedi things and more towards everything around it, away from the Jedi.
Absolutely, and that's how we used to play our games of Star Wars D6. There were some Jedi involved, or like the Quixotic Jedi, or failed Jedi, or they weren't very
Jedis.
Yeah, but we shied away from all that sort of stuff. We were focusing a little because, as far as I'm concerned, the stories of the Jedi are in the main trilogy. You know what I mean? That's the stories of the Jedi and what they got up to and what they were dead. So anything I did was sort of separate from that. We touch on it, but not actually delve that deeply into it. But Star Wars D6 was perfect. And you're talking about inspirations on Those Dark Places, and that Star Wars rulebook was definitely one of them, because when Greg Costigan wrote it, he wrote it as if he was having a chat with you, the GM and the player, as a fellow Star Wars fan. He was just talking about it. This is what happens. He was even making real-world references. You know what I mean? To explain it to it. It felt like a casual chat between you and the writer. And that stuck with me from, I mean, I was how old was I? No, I was 17 years old when I picked up that game. That stuck with me throughout my entire sort of gaming sort of career, I suppose you could call it. When I wrote Those Dark Places, I deliberately wrote it as if somebody was speaking to you, not just about the game, about the actual setting and everything, as if you're having a conversation with someone. Yeah. And that was because of Greg Costigan's fantastic writing and his amazing game design. The guy was fantastic.
Yeah,
thanks,
Greg. Yes, and Strain did say that they miss you on Infinite Monkey Tales. I bet they do. But
bless you. Thank you, mate.
Of course, you are busy as well.
I promise I will get back into it. But I had a deadline to meet, and I didn't want to upset my publisher.
No, but as you said, you are working on a new game. What are you allowed to tell us about that?
Absolutely nothing.
Ah,
I can tell
well,
you.
that's okay. Then we're done.
Well, thanks for coming. I can tell you that it is connected to those dark places.
Okay.
And,
Yeah.
and it is a huge, huge project.
Yeah, I did hear you
For me.
were talking. You were working on a revised version or something of those dark places, but
That was a while ago because I wanted to. Because those dark places, the way it's designed, is designed for one shots mainly. You can do campaigns with it. This is why I included that 25-year contract thing. So I included that so people would keep playing the game to see if they died before they got to the end of their contract. Yeah, I was playing with using the same rules and everything, so it's not going to be too far removed. In fact, it's exactly the same as the original game, except include rules or options for campaign play. But yeah, this project it's a whole new book, and yeah, it'll be out next year. Like I said, I've literally just finished it, so now I'm focusing on another project which I need to finish, which I desperately can't talk about. Which is really frustrating because I really want to.
I bet.
But it's pretty much done now, so hopefully that'll be done. And then I'm working on I self-published a game called Fireteam, using one of my older versions of those Dark Places. And I'm just working on a version of it at the moment called Cyber Streets, which is kind of a cyberpunk version of it.
I've heard about that as well, of course, through
Yeah,
Infinite Monkey Tales.
Yeah, well, I used Fireteam for because Fireteam is basically a military science fiction role-playing game, but it's more of an action game. You know, it's rules like 3 stats. It's a bit silly, and we ran a Warhammer 40,000 game of them playing Marines of a Death Watch Marines going onto a Space Hawk. So, and it worked. I was really pleased with it. It worked better than I thought it would actually, because I've only been playing it in my own setting of the Interplanetary Combine. So to use it for something else and to watch it work, I was actually really happy with, and that sort of gave me the impetus to do more with it. So thanks, Infinite Monkey Tales. You inspire me.
Oh yeah, I'm just going to plug them as well here because I've now been with Infinite Monkey Tales for almost a year. And they let me know so many new systems, so many adventures they gave me. They allowed me to run games with a lot of fun players. Yeah. So if you get the chance, people that are watching,
get over there.
Get over there and get a watch because it's a fun group of people. And I'm not just saying it because we are in it, but
yeah, excellent group. The thing is, I'm a casual with Infinite Monkey Tales, so I'll just pop in whenever I've got some plug, basically. But they've got a massive dearth of games, of different games, massive, different styles, different plays, and so there is something there for everybody.
Yeah,
and those guys were instrumental in getting me back on the horse because after those Dark Places came out, I'd done a few online games, and then I was kind of not retreating away from it because I was trying to focus on other things. I shouldn't have done really. I should have focused more on it. Then I got an invite to come on and run a game for them, and I had so much fun with them that it gave me the impetus to carry on with more those Dark Places material. So I've got a lot to thank them for. Actually, they're actually a fantastic bunch of people.
Yeah, they are. But most of your games are like more the dark sci-fi kinds that you've written by up till now.
Yeah.
Yeah. Ever thought of maybe create a lighthearted role-playing game or just broaden your horizon in that in kind of sense?
I mean, I did a kind of. I wrote the adventures that I wrote for Advanced Fighting Fantasy were kind of light. There's a couple of gruesome moments, but they were just kind of your standard fighting fantasy sort of light affairs. They were good fun. The one that I wrote for Against the Dark Master was. It's kind of, I won't say Game of Thrones. It was kind of a lighter Game of Thrones, so to speak. So it's just action adventure. That kind of, it was kind of like the Two Towers of the Lord of the Rings trilogy. Yeah. So it's a little bit grim, but you get there in the end. And I also wrote an adventure for Dragon Warriors called The Cursed King, which wasn't light, but it was a little bit. It wasn't dark, put it that way. But when I design games, when I designed those Dark Places, I had a very, very definitive idea of the kind of dark science fiction that I wanted to do. And as I was writing it, I was basically trying to balance that out, like you say, with something a little bit lighter. Because you can only stay in that sort of kind of dark, everything's miserable dystopian. Oh God, everything's grey, miserable mindset for so long before it starts to have an effect on you, and you're sort of sitting there writing the game, you're thinking, I really don't want to write this.
Yeah, you would say that someone that always writes dark things and grim stuff, that they start to get a mindset of the like that themselves.
Yeah.
You don't want that.
To be honest with you, it can be quite cathartic because as you're writing it, you're kind of expelling all those thoughts. And sometimes a lot of writers, I mean, you see it with a lot of the famous writers and artists, like people like Giger. I mean, look at the sort of stuff that he used to. But he used to do that to expel the thoughts and ideas that he was having in his head. And I remember ages ago talking about writing and how my ideas build up in me like a pressure cooker. And if I don't get them out of me onto a page, they're just going to sit there. And at some point, I'm just going to pop. And I don't want that to happen. So this is why I used to have so many projects on the go, and I know that Angie used to get really upset with me about it. I couldn't concentrate on one thing at a time.
Oh yeah, I remember.
Because I kept having all these ideas, and I kept having to write them down. And I was so eager to share them as well. I've had this idea about this. This is fantastic. this idea is about three-legged horses with jetpacks. It's amazing. So you know what I mean? I'll just write them down and then just chuck them out at people.
Oh yeah, I've seen that in the IMT chat lots of time. That it was like, John, cool it.
And even my wife said, she goes, "You've got to stop handing this shit out. When you've written it, save it, and just don't tell anyone." I was starting to think, I'm literally just giving stuff away. Yeah. So the last thing I wrote really was Tales of the Infinite, which Infinite Monka Tales have been running. I wrote that game for them.
Yeah, they've played it a few weeks ago, I believe, or maybe a month ago.
Yeah, they've been running it through, I can't remember what it was called now, this kind of setting game creator system which they had, I can't remember what it was called. And then they ran 2 or 3 games. But that system and that setting, I've given that to them for them to do what they want with it. So
yeah, it was specifically written for Infinite Monkey Tales.
Oh yeah, well, I just love the idea of Tales of the Infinite, and then I sort of came up with the idea of the title and then built the setting around the title. I had to get Tales and Infinite in there somewhere. The only word that I missed out was monkey, because that was a bit restrictive.
The players are monkeys.
That was a win-win. Yeah.
And I already got this message 2 times from Strain, and I think it's a in-joke between you and him. Kill the elves.
We're running there's a fantastic game on Drive Through RPG called Darkest Warrens by Scott Malthouse, who did the Romance of the Perilous Land, one of the games that came out before Those Dark Places from Osprey Publishing. And it's a very, very simple 3-page system with an adventure, and I love it. I think it's absolutely fantastic. So I ran this game in my own setting called The Oaths of Helvender, where the castle that they were in was being besieged by elves, and they had a big fight, and pretty much every other line out of his mouth was "kill the elves." And then since then, I think that's kind of a catchphrase. Thanks for the reminder, Strain. I hadn't forgotten.
Okay, is there anyone else in the chat that might have a question for my esteemed guest?
Well, I'm definitely a guest.
Because I'm kind of out of my interview questions, or maybe you have something that you want to talk about, or you are allowed to talk about in your case.
How long have you been gaming, Skoen?
How long I've been playing?
Yeah.
I started, I was, what was it, 15, 16 years old when I already knew about Dungeons and Dragons, and I always wanted to try out, but I never had a group. So I was in my local game store, and I just asked around, is there anyone that wants to try it with me as a player? And I got a group, and since then I started with, I believe, 3.5. I even had a dip in 2nd edition for Spelljammer, which now I'm running myself on this channel for 5th edition.
Yeah, I saw your unboxing video, actually. It looks very good.
Yeah, it looks pretty good, but still, in my opinion, for what you pay for it, you don't get a lot.
Really?
It's about €70, and it are 3 thin books and a DM screen, but I would have expected it to be a little bit more.
Okay. Does it go over all the? Sorry, going off a tangent. Are we going? Is it go through all the basics of what you need for a Spelljammer? So
Yeah,
like,
it's actually just the setting, the rules about the ship combat, stuff like that, and otherwise it's all just the basic D&D 5th edition rules.
Oh, right, okay.
Yeah.
It's a shame because I used to enjoy Spelljammer 20, 30 years ago.
Yeah, there is a chat viewer question by Led Logic. Thank you for the question. When you run Star Trek in those dark places, is it with Xeno creatures and Dark 2?
No, it is. When I ran Star Trek, it was just Star Trek, and I set it post Dominion War. So the players, it was on Infinite Monkey Tales. Of course, it was, and they were jetting around, basically trying to locate and make contact with all the colonies and what have you, and the lost ships that had basically been cut off during the Dominion War in a converted vessel. I can't remember what the vessel was called now. And it's a game that I've been wanting to run for 20 years, believe it or not. I was going to originally play the game post Dominion, when after Deep Space Nine finished. I was going to run the game because I bought Prime Directive, the Prime Directive role-playing game from Task Force Games. Didn't get on with the system, but then noticed that the character sheet worked perfectly well with the D6 system, so I just converted it over to the D6 system. And then I set up this massive campaign about post-Dominion War, and it never came to pass, unfortunately, because we were too emotionally involved with our Warhammer Fantasy roleplay campaign. So I've been waiting for 20 years to run that. So I ran it as a one-shot with them, and yeah, it was just pure Star Trek. I didn't include any other monsters. Because of that game, I then created a supplement called Cosmic Quest. So it's kind of Star Trek but with the numbers filed off, and then gave that away for free. I thought it might be a bit of a laugh. So yeah, there we go. So no, I don't. I don't include any weird sort of stuff that doesn't belong in the Star Trek universe. I try to keep it as pure Star Trek as possible.
Okay, yeah, and I get a question from Jaap Knaap, an old friend of mine, and I think I know the answer to this question, but he also thinks he knows it. Do you know Firefly?
I do.
See?
I do.
Of course he knows.
Yeah.
He just needed to be sure.
I've got the role-playing game. I like Firefly. I'm going to be a bit weird now. I'm going to be probably one of the people who, I'm going to get ostracised. But I like Firefly Flying, but I'm not. I don't miss it. And when it got cancelled, I wasn't fussed. It was good, and I enjoyed it, and it was a lovely setting. It was perfect for a role-playing game. But it's just, there was nothing about it that sort of grabbed me by the heart. But the role-playing game was really, really good. And to be honest with you, I've kind of been doing those kind of games with that kind of crew on that kind of ship when I was doing my Star Wars D6 games in the early 90s. When this TV show came out, I think the reason why I enjoyed it was because I could relate to it in some way. But yeah, it was a good show, and yeah, I'm glad it got the film that it deserved to sort of tie it all up. So you get
that he at least got a worthy end.
Yeah, it did. It's the same with one of my favourite science fiction shows ever was Farscape. Absolutely in love with it.
I love that.
Yeah, well, when it got cancelled at the end of the fourth season, when something quite drastic happens, I was so frustrated. But then a year later, they got to make the Peacekeeper Wars, like a 3-hour miniseries.
Yeah, 3 episodes or something.
It was wonderful. It was fantastic.
Yeah, I'm not that far yet, because I downloaded that entire show, but I'm
Well, I'm not going to go into any details, but season 4, I mean, the show's just bonkers. Yeah, the show's just completely, utterly bonkers. And I think that's why I liked it. It kind of stepped away from that kind of rigid, formulaic science fiction you got in a lot of shows back then. And really just went nuts. And
I'm just a fan of it also because I'm a huge Jim Henson fan.
Mate, you can't go wrong with Muppets, I'm sorry. Muppets make everything better. Muppets and Pirates. So Muppet Pirates was just the greatest film ever made.
Muppets Treasure Island.
yeah, it was. I remember going to see that with my mate Mark. We walked into the wrong screen by mistake and sat down thinking, what are all these kids here for? And then Muppets Treasure Island started and we thought, we'll just stay and watch this then. And I think we were the only ones in the theatre laughing out loud because I'm sorry, but Fozzie Pear with his finger was just a work of genius. But yeah, great film.
Mr. Bimble, he loves my finger.
It's fantastic.
No, but and also what I liked with Farscape is if you look at Star Trek, all the aliens are humanoid. Practically all aliens are human. And
That's right.
if the universe is this big and there are aliens, why would they all look like 2 eyes, nose, mouth, and 2 arms and 2 legs? I mean,
Yeah, all humanoid. I mean, they explain that in one episode of Star Trek at some point. It's a bit silly because everybody knows that the reason why it's like that because of budget. But the great thing about Farscape, like you say, yes, you had the people with the silly makeup and the knobbly foreheads and what have you, but then you had the puppets like Rigel and the pilot. Pilot was just beautiful, beautiful. He had a beautiful model, beautiful voice, beautiful, amazing backstory, and everything about it was just fantastic. And Scorpio is one of the
villain.
one of the greatest bad guys in the history of science fiction. Farscape doesn't get enough love. It really, really doesn't. It really, really should. I wasn't on board with the role-playing game. It felt a little bit flat. Didn't catch the atmosphere of what I liked about Farscape.
I didn't know they had a role-playing game.
Right?
I didn't know that Farscape had a role-playing game.
I can't even remember what the system was. I remember but it was basically just, remember when Lord of the Rings role-playing game came out? I think it was Decipher that did it. And they basically just took screen grabs and put it in the book.
Now I've only played one Lord of the Rings role-playing game on IMT offline, and that's the One Ring. I even got the book after that.
One Ring, I've got the second edition as well. One Ring is probably, I mean, I've got a soft spot for Merp because it's Merp and it's one of the first games I ever played. But the One Ring, I think, is probably one of the best ever interpretive games for a license ever. It captures Lord of the Rings. The original one from Cubicle 7 captured it beautifully. And the Free and the Gam one, visually, I mean, it's the same game, but visually, it's utterly beautiful. So, it is a fantastic game. I don't play it as often as I want to, put it that way.
Yeah. If there is... Jaap Knap has actually maybe... well, it is a very big question. I don't know if you could answer it, but... In your opinion, what is the worst thing ever happened to the roleplay scene? It's a broad subject, I know.
To be honest with you, I think what's bad for some people is good for others. It would be very, very easy for me to turn around and say, I don't like the way the book, I don't like the art in that book, or I don't like the way that system works. And that's completely unfair, because what doesn't work for me is going to work for somebody else. I'm sure there's people out there who enjoyed Phoenix Command, put it that way. So it's like, my opinion on a certain aspect of gaming doesn't matter. We talked about it earlier because what happens at your table is completely different from what happens at somebody else's table. So I could turn around until I'm blue in the face and say, do you know what, AD&D second edition? And I'm not a fan of AD&D second edition. I thought it was bloated. I thought the efficiencies were a little bit... Now, if it was basically trying to expand on basic D&D, and it didn't have much of a framework to expand on, what did second edition for me, what I enjoyed about it was the settings. Forgotten Realms, Dragonlance, Spelljammer. Those are the settings. That's the things I enjoyed about AD&D second edition, not the actual game itself. But there are people out there that swear by it. If I had to say, probably the one thing that has probably changed the face of role-playing hobby in general is the big business, is your massive publishers like Wizards of the Coast dominating the market.
Yeah.
And I'm probably saying that from a point of selfishness because I'm a small independent writer who can't break into the big time. But to be honest with you, if I did break into the big time, it wouldn't be Dungeons and Dragons. But I'm not faulting them for that. They're a business at the end of the day. They've got people to pay. They've got money to make. They've got a famous license to push. And yes, I am looking forward to the movie coming out next year. It looks like a laugh.
Me too.
If there's one thing that kind of... I don't think it's bad for the hobby, but I think it's bad for the smaller industry people out there because they're in the shadow of D&D. And I remember getting into a conversation with somebody a little while ago. I won't name names, and they get by. Most of their money comes in because they write stuff for D&D, but they don't want to write stuff for D&D. They want to write their own stuff for their own system and other systems. And there are better systems out there, in my opinion, anyway. So if there's one thing I think which is probably sort of divided people, probably for all the wrong reasons, I'm thinking about it, it's the multi-million-dollar juggernaut that is the Wizards of the Coast and the whole D&D brand, because it sends everybody else is cast into the shadows, and they dominate everything. Unfortunately, it's also brought out the worst in people as far as that's concerned, because now you've got a lot there's some sort of ultra old school gamers who are very vocally against the new way of doing things, and that's completely unfair, because I'm pretty sure that back then there were people against the way that they did things, the way that wargamers looked at the role players, or old school role players looked at the Vampire the Masquerade players, or the way Vampire the Masquerade looked at LARPers, the way LARPers looked at tabletop role play. There was always a division there, but now, unfortunately, the internet has just basically exploded that out of all context, and now, yeah, it's become like a battleground. And we were talking about this earlier. The only reason why I'm on Twitter is because that's my best avenue of exposure, to try and get my product out there.
And in that way, I understand, because I hate it.
It really can be accessible. People's attitudes and opinions towards each other, especially people who are basically just screaming because they want. Basically, they're using the popularity of certain games as a soapbox to get attention, and I just can't be bothered with any of that. I'm just here to play games and to support smaller. Support other gamers, so people just basically have fun together. I mean, I will literally play anything as long as it's not morally or sort of, you know what I mean. As long as it doesn't upset me in that way. You can call me triggered if you want to. Oh no, he's getting triggered. Well, no, I'll just know my limits. I know what I want to play, and that's that. So I went off on a bit of a tangent then. I keep doing that. I do apologise.
That's
but,
okay.
Yeah, in answer to your question, yes, I think one of the things that hasn't ruined role playing, but it has changed the face of it, is multinational conglomerates of businesses. It's the corporation behind.
The corporations.
Yeah, absolutely. I won't say it feels soulless, because there's a lot about the new D&D 5th edition that I do like.
Me too.
But it does feel like. It does feel like the role playing and everything is taking a bit of a back seat, and everything else, the merchandising, is what people.
Yeah, but that's what we also spoke of earlier this episode. That I asked you what you liked more, roleplay or combat, and we also said 5th edition, or at least D&D, starts to become more combat focused and less roleplay focused. They are forgetting the most important thing in the name role-playing game, which is role-playing.
Role-playing, absolutely, yeah. The thing is, D&D 5th edition is great. In fact, it's my favourite version of Dungeons and Dragons. I think it's an excellent game. It's very modular. So if I don't like feats or I don't like talents, I'll just drop them and go straight back to basics, which is what I was doing when I was playing 5th edition. I was running Forgotten Realm games a couple of years ago for an online group when COVID hit. And I just stripped it all back to its basics, and that's the way I prefer playing. And some of the support material which I was getting hold of was really, really good, and it is great fun. And I'm guilty. I've got D&D merchandise. Look, I've got a massive D&D dice, D20 dice lamp behind me up there, next to the flag. You know what I mean? So I buy those bits and bobs as well, because it is fun.
Yeah.
But yeah. Also, role playing has become like a spectator sport. And I think that's actually with actual plays, and of course the majority of them are Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah, that's Critical Role's.
Their influence, and I actually think that's a good thing, because for me, it's introduced me to lots of different ways that different people play their games. So when I was playing at my table, I was quite insular. I had a very focused idea of what a game should be, or how they should be played, or how I wanted to play it. And now I'm looking at all these other tables, playing all these different games. And thinking, oh, that's a really good idea. I like the way he did that. Oh, that's an excellent idea. I mean, Matt Mercer's a great DM. He really is, because he's got the acting talent. He can do the silly noises, and he's very, very focused on the game.
I do that too in my games. I'm trying to be. I'm doing voice acting classes here in the Netherlands, and I want to become a voice actor, and I use D&D and role playing games to practice voices.
And that's great. And I'd as far as I'd never really thought of that before. Whenever I did voices, they were either really, really deep, or they were just given an accent. You know what I mean? You give them a silly accent, but they can guarantee 2 games later I'd forgotten what the accent was. So for some strange reason, that professor that was speaking to at Miskatonic is now suddenly Irish. You know what I mean? So it didn't make no difference. It made no sense to them. So you watch videos like that. You watch Critical Role. I don't really watch Critical Role anymore. I watched the first season.
Me too. Yeah.
And then you watch other shows as well, like from Monk Tales, like Garblag Games, like Victory Condition Gaming. You watch all these different channels, and you see their different approaches and different ways of gaming. How can anybody not benefit from that kind of exposure to different kinds of gaming, different levels of gaming, the way people want to play their games? They want to play them all nice and cutesy and fey. Brilliant. If they want to play more dark and miserable and nasty, fantastic. I'm learning new things as I'm watching all these actual plays. So that's a benefit in my book.
Yeah, and Jaap Knaap, he answered of your answer on his question. He understands and he agrees. He even prefers new systems. He even had a few homebrews. I've played in one of his homebrews, and I believe he had it based off of White Wolf. Am I right, Jaap Knaap? The one I've played with you, I believe it was almost 5 years ago now. And he allowed any race, anything you want, not even really classes, but it was fun because he tried to make it a sandbox kind of game. We had to build up an entire city and everything. It was very focused on player freedom.
Yeah.
But
it's brilliant. I mean, I know gamers who wouldn't do that. They don't like that lack of focus. They don't like they like the idea of going to a dungeon and being restricted as to where they can and can't go and what they're doing, because that's what they find exciting about the game.
Yeah.
And that's what makes. That's why COVID's a pain in the arse for everybody, really. Let's face it. Because what I want to do is go out like I used to 20 years ago and game with 3 or 4 different groups doing different things. There was this one game group I used to game with, which were very, very focused on dungeons. So they want a dungeon that somebody who was going to map the dungeon. They knew different traps. There's somebody there who knew the bestiary inside out. Like the character in the game is Darkness Rising, where he's there literally just memorising what monsters can do. And then there was another game we were really, really freeform. They didn't care about dice rolls. They would have spent an entire game just having their characters chat to non-player characters.
Yeah.
And get where it needs to be through just conversation. And that was great. But then COVID came along, and then it kind of ruined things a little bit, because now I don't have that face-to-face sort of experience. But then I discovered online gaming and watching other people play, and sometimes watching other people play can just be just as entertaining as actually playing yourself.
Oh yeah, I do watch. I sometimes don't watch everything of IMT. Sorry, people, but I do like some games. Just and that's what I like about watching other people play. Just the fun they have with each other. It's not the combat that I want to see. No, I want to see the people having fun. I was at TwitchCon and there was a British tabletop stream group there, and they played a intro of a campaign they're going to do, and I believe it starts this month or next month on their stream, and it was just fun to see them have fun.
Yeah.
And that was you do watch it on Twitch live sometimes, but this was the first time I watched it live, as in I was in the room and they were playing it, and you would think that's not fun. Oh, and apparently my webcam just decided to quit on me.
A lot of it can be fun. You can watch it. You were saying earlier about the combat. A lot of the time, if I'm watching a game and it switches to, outcome the battle mats and stuff, I'll wind past it, because you know what I mean. The fun part is watching characters interact. I'm not 100% on board with just watching people roll dice and hoping that they killed something. I usually try as best as I can to skip to the end of the combat.
Yeah.
Even though combat can be exciting sometimes if it's done right.
This is annoying now. I don't have webcam. Yeah.
That was me worried about my webcam not working.
Yeah. I might need to get something new because I think it just sucked my entire phone dry. I don't know if there are still some questions from the audience. Otherwise, it might be a point to maybe say we have talked about enough. I don't know if you would.
Well, it's not the same that I can't see it now, Skoen. So yeah. Although this has been really, really enjoyable. It's been really, really good. But we've had plenty to talk about. You've got questions. I've had a great time.
Well, Jaap Knaap says just a thank you to all the contributions to the community. Yeah, well, if it's for both of us, then you are very welcome.
No, thanks for everybody who tuned in to watch. Actually, I hope we didn't bore you too much. I do have a tendency to go off on tangents when I'm talking about something, and that's an issue that I have in my games design. When I'm doing something will pop into my head, and I'm thinking, "Oh my god, that would be interesting," and then I start writing that instead. I'm surprised I got this bloody book finished. To be fair.
Yeah. Oh man, I think the back camera of this phone isn't working well. It is on screen of the camera, but not on the app. Okay. Fun. I'm gonna need to look that for the next time.
Get a camera.
Yeah. I need to get a actual webcam maybe. Well, I'm getting paid next week, so.
Hey.
There. This one is starting to work again. Otherwise, I need to. Well, I hope at least you don't see me now, but I just you'll hear me now. I hope you guys at least had fun of this first episode of my talk show. I'm going to try to get other people to come in as a guest. I already know some people. If you guys know the Gilded Flask, they all said they wanted to be a guest here, so we are going to try to get them in this same setting. Hopefully I will get some more questions in my head. Well, it still went pretty well. I mean, I had all the questions that I written down and answered, and I even had some come up while talking, which is always good.
I think I had a great time. Thank you very much.
Yeah, well, John, thank you for being a guest, the first guest in my show.
My pleasure. Thank you for inviting me as well.
Yeah, of course. I hope you had fun. If your new game is out and you are allowed to talk more about it, you're always welcome to come back.
Oh, definitely. I'll be giving you a call next time.
Okay, yeah. And everyone who watched, thank you for coming. This will also be on my YouTube channel, so I will post a link in my Discord. If you want to become a guest, you can always join my Discord. I will give you guys the Discord link. Here you go. And I will see you guys on the next one, I hope. John,
Thank
have
you
a
very
nice
much.
night.
An absolute pleasure.
You're welcome, and till next time, guys.